There's no moat out there of LLM or SEO or anything else that will replace pure brand loyalty. And so building that brand comes from a lot of those personal experience community. And again, those are things that it's hard to connect those to pipeline all the time.
Hi, everyone. Our guest today is a 5-time CMO with 20 years of experience across B2C and B2B at companies including Gartner, Topto, HYCU, Demandbase, and now 6sense. She's a Harvard MBA and has been building marketing functions from scratch ever since. She actually joined 6sense as CMO in March 2026, and 6sense, if you don't know it, is a GTM intelligence platform for the agentic era. It uses AI and intent data to show B2B revenue teams which accounts are actively researching and in market before they fill out a form or even talk to a seller. So welcome to the show, Kelly. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate that.
So you've been a CMO multiple times at 5 companies. What do you think is different today walking into your 5th role? The world has changed. AI is very different. What's different today versus the first role you joined in?
I mean, it's completely different starting in this role versus just my last role. So not to mention 4 back, because I think especially in this space, in the rev tech space, in the SaaS world where AI is kind of replacing everything, I think every single decision gets looked at different. Like I had pretty standard playbooks that I took from sort of 1 to 2 to 3. But now the playbook in 4 and the playbook in 5, like both in the same industry, both the same category, direct competitors of each other. And I manage it completely different than I did the last one. So I think the big changes are, one, like I just think about structuring the team differently. I used to be really big on spans and layers and kind of short, fat trees. I wanted one person managing 4 to 7 and all those kind of things, and kind of built my team to kind of look like that. Now what I realize is I want to align to the customer journey. I want to align to KPIs, and my team and my tree might be upside down because I need leaders. And then I have agents that can automate so much of the bottom, like the actual, like the manual work. And so it ends up being sort of, more senior leaders, fewer team folks underneath. And that's just because of now the strategy is so different. Like there's less arms and legs needed for all the execution because you can automate some of that, and you need big thinking. Obviously, it's not every category, right? There's events. I need feet on the street to do events. I need some of that. But just my overall sort of org model, I think my hiring philosophy is different now in terms of the skill set that I need. And the pace with which I backfill. I don't backfill direct 1-for-1s anymore. Now when I look, I'm like, ooh, I can actually use an agent for that and take that headcount and reallocate it to, I don't need to backfill the writer. Instead, I'm going to backfill with a prompt engineer or a content strategist or an editor. And so it's been just interesting on so much change in the market.
So I think I've heard this with other leaders as well. If we have listeners who are trying to get into marketing or are junior and are having a hard time finding a job, what advice do you have for them to start their careers in today's world? I think it's very hard to be a junior marketer today.
Yeah, I think about this a lot because I just sent my first kid to college 10 days ago. And so we're like, what are you going to major in that's not going to get replaced by AI? What's the right function? And I don't know if he ever wants to go into marketing. I doubt he does. But it makes me think a lot about what are your peers going to be when they grow up? What are they going to come out of college and do? And so I think the main deal where I'm seeing a lot of success and where marketers are coming in and being very impactful very early, definitely in the event space, we see a lot. That function, like I said, is a manpower heavy function. It's a good way because events are now held so much to both brand and pipeline targets. It's a good way to get a cross section of the business, kind of full funnel impact, both customers and prospects. You get a lot of mixed content, logistic, messaging, all that good stuff. So I think that part is a big one, or a great place to come in. And the BDRs are great. We tend to hire them straight out of college or within 1 or 2 years. And I've hired, not me personally, because I've only been here 6 months or 5 months, but Our team has brought in probably 3 or 4 BDRs over the last year that we've transitioned into marketing roles. So they've been a BDR for a few years. We transitioned one into MOPS recently. We transitioned one into events. One into field marketing. That's a great path from BDR to field marketing. And again, field marketing is unlike just events, field is a little bit more tied to the pipeline specifically. You get that relationship with sales, you take your BDR experience and can bring it across. I think those all help. Product marketing is another area where I think people come in. It's a really it's just such a strategic role that sometimes it's hard to get in at a junior level. But if you can get in at sort of the product marketing coordinator level, that's a role that I think the production, so I don't think the volume of PMMs is going to get bigger or anything else. But I think the production value and efficiency of PMM is going up so much because of AI. So it's helping take, a really, really solid, well thought out, human generated messaging house, and then you can create lots and lots of collateral out of it. And I think PMMs really value the thinking and the strategy more than like the production of content. And so that's another place I think where people can come and either at the PM or PMM level, really junior, learn from people above them, and have a pretty solid career path.
So you mentioned the SDR path. I think there's a lot of companies out there who believe that they can, you don't need BDRs or SDRs anymore. I tend to obviously disagree, but I'm curious your opinion on this, on what you've seen. It sounds like you guys also disagree as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a believer for sure. I mean, I think there is definitely AI mixed with humans in that mix. I'll tell you exactly how we do it and what the tech stack and things that we're using at the BDR space. But I'm generally a believer that, and by the way, BDRs do, I think, 64% of my pipeline right now. And so it's a pretty big driver. Like that shows how critical they are. We use AI so if we think about the segments, so I think you really need BDRs at the upper segment. So if you're selling to large enterprise, I think you definitely need them. Same thing probably with kind of mid market. I think the SMBs, you can automate a lot of that work depending on your target accounts, but we're able to automate that space through, because a lot of that comes in inbound. So it's coming in off of paid search or organic or direct traffic. So a lot of the SMBs will come in from inbound, right? So they'll come in through SEO, they'll come in through organic, they'll come in through direct traffic, convert through a chatbot on the website. That we can do a couple emails worth, like to get a meeting scheduled and things, all of that with AI. So we use our own 6sense AI email to convert those into meetings. They do the follow up, they get the meeting scheduled, they get the BDR aligned to it. They do all of that. And then obviously the BDR hosts the meeting in partnership with the AE. And then it moves on to AE when it moves to pipeline. But so we use AI there. We use AI for, and so our commercial team is very small. Like our SMB BDR team is like 2 people. It's very small. Whereas like our strategic accounts, our enterprise is going to be more like 6 to 8. So the ratio is a little bit different. And then we use AI for, auto dialing. We use Nooks. We just moved over to Nooks. We use those at my last company as well. And it works really, really well for not just auto dialing, but doing even like stepping into kind of the outreach sales off type function. So they're doing a lot of work to move through that sales funnel. We'll use Clay sometimes to augment contact data. And so it'll kind of come through and add specific contact news on top of the data we already have, obviously, in 6sense and through our own proprietary data. And then we've used Reggie in the past. I don't use it currently, but I've used Reggie.ai to do automated follow-up on events. So like after an event, when you get the list load that came for the folks that came by the booth, Reggie does the follow-up on that. Reggie puts them into a nurture. Reggie puts them into, gets them scheduled with BDR. So there's a lot of that as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer because I think the human component is really, really important. And like I said, they drive so much of the pipeline, but I think you have to use them intentionally. Use them up market, more so than down market. And you automate a lot of their research and things on the back end.
I would love to maybe double click on that because I'm actually working on exactly what you just said right now about, and Mona has told me that I need to do a better job of following up after events. And I'm curious if we could just go one level deeper on the BDR email, and like, is it someone who has given them given you their email, or you know that their email some other way? What information are you using to score them? And then how are you personalizing the email? Like any non-obvious details on the email?
Yeah, I mean, certainly when we get event follow up, a lot of events will have registration, so we'll have email addresses. Booth scans will often get email addresses as well from that. Or we will get sort of name and LinkedIn, and we can do a direct mail through LinkedIn as well. So we'll do some version of that. And then, yeah, I mean, and then we have an automated, we build sequences before our events. Either we write them or the BDR leader writes them, or we work in concert. The BDRs report up into my revenue marketing leader. And so they work together on those sequences. And then, yeah, so when that event is over, when the list our MOPS team loads up the list, and then there's an automated sequence that goes out to them that does the follow up. And then, and depending on what comes in off of that, obviously a real human will jump in after that if we get a response back. So that's kind of how we do it.
It's very interesting. I think we did this whole analysis of some of our customers, and we have a report showing people why their events don't work. And it's usually because no one followed up. But I think Ethan is interesting because I think out of all our customers, he has the lowest follow-up after events. And I think he's like very uncomfortable following up with people. So the question is like, what do you say after an event to get people to, take a look at you? And I think I also struggle with that. I just say, oh, thank you and stuff, but it's hard to ask people to like take a look at our product.
Yeah, I mean, I think so we do events pretty different, both in my last couple companies. So I'm not a believer, to be honest, very much, especially if you have brand recognition already. I'm not necessarily a big believer in the booth, like the trade show booth. That part is not. I think the thing, I think in the most recent history, especially the last year, and you and I were just talking about this, Mata, like I think the swing from, the last 10 years, let's be honest, it's been all about measurable marketing, right? It's been, if you can't prove ROI from it, then it didn't work. And so it ended up like brands got abandoned and dollars all swung to pipe gen because you could actually connect pipe generation, especially online digital pipe generation, directly to the dollars. And so brand becomes a little bit less. And so, and we can talk about attribution and all the ways we get there. But so when I look at events, we look at it in a few different ways. And I'm actually in the middle currently of doing a deep dive ROI analysis of all the child campaigns under an event. So for example, if we go to Forrester, the Forrester B2B Summit, we're going to have a booth that gets booth scans. We set up ancillary events that are, and so that's run by our like corporate events team. Then we have like ancillary events like Club 6, which is what we set up as like take over a restaurant for 3 days during Forrester right across the street. And that's where we have meetings, and we like set the sales team and the CSMs out, a month leading up to the event to like book as many meetings as they can with me, with our CEO or our, whoever it is, our CRO, whoever we can get there to the event. And then we just meet with people all day long. And then we set up invite dinners on top of that. So the nights of the event, we'll do a VIP dinner for C-levels. We'll do a practitioner level dinner or event or ice skating or whatever the activity is. And so then we are able to look at all those child campaigns. And what I find out is that from a pipe contribution perspective, those ancillary events are the ones that pay off. The booth doesn't. The booth scans don't. That can be people who just want cool socks, right? So you don't necessarily get a lot off of that. But the ones who come to your restaurant, do your club event, have a meeting with your CMO who's sitting in the room, go to the dinner that night, interact with other folks, those turn into pipeline often. We're able to track all of those because we know who invited, who came, all that good stuff. So, and then of course, like we talked about, the follow-up is super important from there. But that's what we're seeing. And I'm thinking, and the balance, again, if you're trying to build a brand, I think that role at trade shows is good. But if you're trying to contribute it or attribute it to pipeline, not as good. But it does build your brand presence and your association with whatever parent brand is at is hosting the event. But I'm a big believer, as part of this brand swing that's happening right now, is owned is king, right? Like your owned podcast is what's going to drive way more than you participating in others, because you're driving that ownership, right? You're putting your brand on it. You're putting your name on it. Same thing with whether it's an owned newsletter, an owned event, your own hosted event, your own hosted field marketing dinner, your own hosted podcast, your own hosted user group, community, any of those kind of things, because I think the LLMs are responding to that. And they're picking up that ownership and that equity that comes in a place that a few years ago, I think it was more about distribution. Just cover as much ground, associate with as many different companies as you can, get in front of as many. And now I think it's swinging a little bit.
Awesome. Well, this is a great transition into multi-touch attribution. So you described that events are very effective and that the child events are very effective and how to measure that. And then you've also talked, there's a saying about you can't manage what you can't measure. And you mentioned that you can't imagine how a CMO would make decisions without multi-touch attribution. Maybe you could just walk us through how you think about multi-touch attribution.
Yeah. So I'm not a recent convert. I'm probably 3 years ago convert to multi-touch. So I had always, for some reason, been in organizations where we ran on last touch or first touch, and that felt super valuable. You sort of get caught up in that, like, what is the thing that convinced them to take the meeting? That's obviously like the most important thing. Or what's the thing that got them to even pay attention to us? Like somehow we had to market to them and they had to click on it for them to know who we were, which doesn't make any sense. But at the time, I was sort of caught up in this first touch, last touch, not because just because that's all I knew. When I got to my last company, they were running multi-touch attribution, leveraging Visible. And it took me so long to understand what I was looking at. I'm like, what do these dollars mean? And what's double counted and what's not? And what I realized is that I was able to and now multi-touch attribution, like, let's be fair, is not actual attribution, but it is relative attribution. And I think that's what's most important, especially depending on what model you use. Here we use stream data. I can talk about some of the trade-offs of both, but the general idea for multi-touch attribution is that rather than taking a point in time and saying, this is the thing that created that pipeline, especially when you move up market and have a lot of touch points, right? A sales cycle for an enterprise deal, it could be 6 or 9 months. And so it's not one thing, right? You're touching a bunch of different things. And if you only look at last touch, some things will get de-emphasized. Paid search would go away because no one if selling to enterprise is winning a deal on a paid search that converts to pipeline that moment. Like paid search is like early in the research stage, right? Like you are researching for I need the top 5 CRM providers, and it's popping to the top. So that's going to be early in your research stage. But if you're on a last touch attribution right before pipeline, paid search, you're going to be like, I'm going to cancel all my Google dollars. I'm shutting them down. But the reality is that they're touching lots of things, right? And so what multi-touch allows you to do is it looks at every single touch point, first touch to last touch, and it assigns a value based on that. Depending on your company, depending on your what model you're using, if it's Visible or Dream Data or whoever it is, there's different models of whether it's like 20, 20, 20, and then the gap is filled. So what that means is like, if you think about like a U-shape or a W-shaped attribution curve, that's kind of the most traditional one, especially for a big complex business. It basically says we're going to give of this pipeline value, let's say it's $100,000, we're going to put 20% of the value at first touch. We're going to put 20% of the value on last touch. And then we're going to put 20% at the pipeline conversion touch, whatever that is. And then the balance is going to be split by, it's going to like get whatever that percentage is. So there's 20 other touches, it gets some fraction of that. There's smarter ways now. AI has gotten smarter to know like which touches actually drive conversion and which ones don't. So for example, like on a standard model like that, it's a straight math exercise. And what happens is like email, for example, gets its fair share, just like a web does, just like an event. And you're like, oh, wait a second. So I took them to a 3-hour dinner in New York City at like a 5-star restaurant, and that's getting the same credit in this attribution model as that email that they never read. Like that doesn't make any sense. And so the models now are smart enough to be like, yeah, they got that email, but if they hadn't got that email, it wouldn't have affected conversion. But that event that you did, that's what affected conversion because they loved the conversation or whatever. And so we use that. And so what it allows me to do then, so when I say it's not accurate, it's not, because you're saying $100,000 deal and I'm going to give 5,000 credit to a webinar and I'm going to give 10,000 credit to the field marketing dinner. So it's not accurate, but it is relative. And so I can look at that from an ROI perspective and say, okay, I spent, you know, $500,000 on this event and it contributed unique pipeline dollars across all those attributions. It contributed 2 million in pipeline. That tells me I got 4x ROI out of that. So I know that because the average event should get at least 2x because there's a balance of brand and pipeline. So if I know if event's going to get 2x and I just got 4x, that event was a good use of dollars and I should do that again next year. If I come in and I'm like, man, I spent 500 and I got 600, that's terrible ROI. And it wasn't underwater necessarily, though it is actually, since you're not going to close 100% of that pipeline. But if I look at that, I'm going to say, I'm going to cut that for next year. So that's why I say I'm breaking down child elements of an event because I can see that, like, what's the ROI on the booth versus the ROI on the field dinner that we hosted there? What's the ROI on the team meeting that we did at Club 6? Like, I can break all that down and actually see which parts do we need to spend more on and which ones do we want to spend less on. So I'm a big believer. Like I said, I fought it for like 6 months at my last company and then finally went in. And then I was like, okay, I'm so in. Now I can actually tell, like, every dollar paid media, how much pipeline is it contributing? Every dollar I spend on an event, how much pipeline is it contributing? And I'm not double counting. I'm actually looking, it all adds up to the total pipeline number that we have. And then really the last touch we only use for sourcing. So we only do that for a marketing, like, is the pipeline marketing sourced versus sales sourced versus partner sourced versus CS sourced. And I just do that on a last touch basis because who is the one who actually set up the meeting for the pipeline? Was it the BDRs? Then it's marketing. And the BDRs are only working off of marketing activity. Then I use that marketing contribution number and do the multi-touch against that and assign it out to the team. I mean, then I can actually, and then I make budgets off of that, right? I go back to finance and say, reallocate the budget to maximize the efficiency of these marketing dollars based on these ROI numbers.
This episode is brought to you by Upside. If you've ever tried to answer the question, what actually drove that deal, or where should I invest next quarter, you know how messy B2B intelligence really is. Upside is a revenue intelligence platform built by engineers and marketers who spent over a decade in the trenches at companies like Branch, Outreach, and MuleSoft. We got tired of building internal tools just to make sense of our own data, so we built a platform we always wish we had. Upside uses AI to unlock and organize the messy data in calls, transcripts, Salesforce fields, marketing automation tools, and beyond to help you answer the questions you never could before. Questions like what actually drove a specific deal and how brand awareness helped influence the buying group, or the reasons you are winning or losing. Better insights, smarter decisions, stronger outcomes. If you're ready to act with confidence rather than guessing, head to Upside Back Tech to learn more.
That's great. And then Mata and the Upside team did an analysis for us where we looked at last touch versus their journey view. And the two views gave completely different answers. So last touch, I think, was like email was our best channel. Whereas first touch and events are bad. Don't do any events ever again. Obviously, I need to do better follow-up with my events. But then if we looked at the whole journey, it looked like events were actually very effective. And then our research, which also our research did poorly in last touch. So we have these totally different answers. And I'm curious, when you look at these different attribution models, are there any themes that you've seen us the stuff do especially well or especially not well that you've done more of or cut?
Yeah, I think what we realize is that on a multi-touch basis, because when I got to 6sense, we were running on last touch. And so they were making decisions based on that. And so they cut all the paid search dollars. And then we get in here and we start looking at a multi-touch basis. We're like, whoa. Paid search is just early in the journey. So I think paid search is one you have to look at on a multi-touch basis in order to understand how much it's actually contributing. So that's one that will look very different last touch and first touch. Webinars were another one. So webinars were one, I think I pulled it, the first time I pulled the numbers, I saw that in the last 6 months, webinars had contributed like $400K in pipeline. And I was like, okay, I mean, they're free. So what's to lose other than time and whatever, but $400K. When I pull them on a multi-touch, it was like 9.8 million. Like, it was massively different. And the reason was because webinar is not that thing you do like, should I buy it or should I not? I'm gonna go to this webinar and decide. Webinar is part of like the brand building, thought leadership, understand like the roadmap, like depending on which kind of webinar you go to. And so they kind of happen mid-cycle. So webinars are one of those that I tell my team, I want a webinar every single week. I don't care what it is. I want a webinar every single week because they're such a big pipeline driver. They're very low cost, if at all, other than time. So those are two. Email is one that on a last touch basis could be something that sort of triggers somebody into something like you can dangle a deal like, hey, like, click here to get your free whatever Starbucks gift card and get a meeting. And email is going to maybe get that. I don't know if that would be email or gifting, but one of them will sort of rise to the top as sort of the pipeline driver on a last touch basis. But in reality, email or no email, they're not, it's not driving the most pipeline, right? No one's reading email, especially not like branded emails. They may reply to BDR activity. But then that becomes a little bit more of an outbound motion and less of kind of like email marketing. So that's one. And then, like I said, events, I think trade shows kind of become good touch points for brand building. They're never going to create pipeline. Pipeline's going to come from a direct one-to-one with someone. I've seen surprising good work on inbound, like people coming in off direct mail, conversion off of like a qualified chatbot or anything else. And I think it's because we are targeting one, I think customers are smarter than they used to be. So we used to say, like, I think paid search is dropping a little bit because, well, certainly for me, because I market to marketers. And so I think marketers don't click on sponsored ads because they know what they are and they know that it costs that company. At least I don't, because I'm like, I'm not going to charge that CMO because for me, I'll just scroll down to the organic one because it's cheaper. Like I'm going to save the CMO some money. But I think that's a brand build thing, right? If you can get, and I think people are smart enough that they don't want to get retargeted off of the paid ad. They're looking at the organic stuff. And so the organic stuff, you can really target the thought leadership and brand build there. And then you get a much higher conversion rate off an organic click than you do off a paid click.
It's really interesting. I think the thing that we found is so much of actually what drives deals is in calls and emails. And people tell you, I heard about Ethan's company on Lenny's podcast, but it's hard to have that touch point. So I think what's been really cool with AI is that you can actually because you have access to calls and emails and you can actually extract the right data, all the things that maybe before never got credit now are getting credit. So people are working on the right things. So I think that's been one of the cool things about AI and measurement that I've seen.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, and we're at 6sense, what we're doing is, in the past, so 6sense, of course, is an account-based go-to-market solution, or that's what it's been in the past. It's really a revenue intelligence platform because its bread and butter is really in the intent data that it's gathering first-party, second-party, third-party data, the predictive modeling it does to create kind of activation in the market that allows a customer to use that intelligence and know when, where, who to go after. So they can make decisions on their go-to-market strategy. And so that's what 6sense has done, but it's always been kind of boxed into the 6sense application. So you take all these insights, then you activate it through the 6sense marketing application or the sales application or advertising or email. But now what we're seeing, to your point, is we're opening up that intelligence so that it's a full open ecosystem. So you can use that intelligence to feed your whole tech stack, whether it's your MCP to talk to Claude or ChatGPT, whether it's through APIs to talk to Gong, get some of that sales intelligence insight you just talked about, some of those call logs and insights there, whether it's through SalesLoft or Salesforce or, I don't know, Clary or TurnZero or whoever it happens to be, that you can feed that data and receive that data so that you get so much smarter and you can actually use those call insights you're just talking about, Mata, and we can take Gong intelligence. It feeds into that predictive modeling that 6sense is doing to then tell you even more where to go after, what the message should be, what you should, who you should talk to. And I think that opening of that ecosystem, that connecting around single data, is just going to make all of us smarter in the way that we talk, because context is key, right? And that context comes from talking to all the different applications versus a singular data point and expecting your AI to run perfectly off of one set of data, or expecting your 6sense to run perfectly off of one set of data. Like, you need all that whole data pool to know, the latest and greatest on contact info and buyers.
And I would love to a large, or I'll start over. a big theme, I'm in the answer engine optimization GEO space. A big theme is on measurement. It's hard to measure answers that are zero click, and most answers are zero click. We just published a study with N8N where last touch from LLMs was 1% and self-reported was 9%. So it's 9x difference for self-reported versus last touch. Self-reported, which is obviously a different evaluation method. I'm curious how you think about how LLM conversions when there was no click might fit into multi-touch, or just generally if you have thoughts on how to do measurement there. And also curious your thought on self-reported as another measurement technique to layer on top of multi-touch.
Yeah, the LLM side is interesting because the numbers are so small right now, to your point, because the click rate through that is so small. And we also know that it's so early in the cycle. And so, or in the decision making, right? Like my first thing is to go ask Charlie. That's what I call my ChatGPT, or go ask Toby. That's what I call Claude. To like give me a short list of who I should go after, or what vendors should I consider for this use case. And so I think a lot of that research happens early in the decision making stage. I think quantifying it is going to be harder. That's kind of where I think we're on this, like we're squeezing the balloon back the other way. So as right now, I'm working on my strategy for the back half of the year. And when I'm looking at it, I've spent so many years on sort of what we call the 5% of folks in the market. And you make decisions on that 5% differently than you do on the 95% who are in your ICP, but not in the market yet. And so when you're focusing on that 5%, that is bottom of funnel, that is pipeline, that is click, that is conversions, that is all that, which is super important. But now, because people are starting their search in the LLMs, like that's influenced by brand, right? That's influenced by making sure that like, it's why like even press releases took a swing, right? There was a few years like where press releases, I was kind of like, I'm not doing any more press releases. Nobody reads these things. They're super important to get the message all articulated. They're super important to be able to brief media, but the standalone actual newswire press release, I was like, why are we doing this? Now I realize that press releases are feeding these LLMs. That's where they're getting a lot of their information. And so they're super, super important, not because anybody's reading the press release in its entirety, but because it populates the LLMs, and that's where they're pulling that expertise from. So I think that's a really big deal. And so I think, anyway, I just think that like the brand numbers in general are that much more important. So my new strategy is marketing is focused on the 95% that are not in market yet, but are building their shortlist. Because we know that 94% of people come into an RFP with the shortlist already formed. And 77% of the time, whoever they came into that RFP with on their shortlist is who wins the deal. And so they're making a decision long before they ever talk to a seller. And 80% of the time, that's right. And so if they know that it's going to be that list, then you have to win them at the brand stage. And to me, that's getting in the LLMs. That's not driving a click because they're not really in market for it. What that is making sure that you are in their consideration when they are actually ready to buy it. So to me, it's a little bit more of we're going back to the days of a little bit harder to measure. I can look at the LLM numbers. I report on the LLM numbers. But again, they're going to be based on click through, not show up. And right now, while they're click through, the numbers are just small. And so, yeah, I mean, I just don't think people, I never click on the link inside the LLMs, but it's certainly the first place I start.
Yeah, we've seen similar things where a lot of prompts are branded prompts where you already have a consideration set and you're asking the LLM to help you make a decision, or you're evaluating a particular company and you're asking questions about it. And so in SEO, you would focus on what's the best tool for X. But in LLMs, people already know the brand that they want and they're asking, is it legit? What are the alternatives? Tell me about the pricing. And then this content that nobody read before, press releases, now is telling your brand story. And then especially we've seen companies where they do one thing and then they want to expand their offering to this other thing, but the LLM doesn't know that because it's looking at content that's old, or there's just not enough content saying we do this new thing. And so stuff like press releases and branded content and product content is what we see more and more feeding in to the LLM, because I know that I'm considering 6sense. Do they do this thing well? What are the alternatives? That's what we've seen.
Yeah, and that's why that owned content is so important. That's why I think it's owned events, it's owned thought leadership, it's owned research, it's owned, press release, of course, is written by us. I think all of those give us a chance to tell and amplify our story.
Yeah, it's interesting on brand. I'm an engineer. I used to be an engineer, then I became a CMO, and I did not believe in brand. And so when I was like leading it at Branch, I think we did only things that were measurable. And I was like looking back and I was like, now that I work with a lot more customers and I started to dig into their data, I really think actually brand is the thing that gets people to eventually convert, even though it's harder to measure. So I think I read your article around this and I think you talk a lot about it. What are things that you think someone should focus on those 95% of people? How do you do brand well, especially, in today's AI world, outside of like just own content?
Yeah. I mean, when I look at the top four things driving my pipeline right now on a multi-touch attribution basis, the top four things are organic search, paid display, so not paid search, but paid display or paid social. So which operate as an awareness vehicle more than a conversion vehicle, right? So they're top of funnel advertising, organic social, and one other one which I can't remember right now. And maybe it's paid display and paid social separate, but all of them are brand element. The things that are sitting there are not they're not webinars, they're not field dinners, they're not any of those, which are all pipeline drivers. They are instead like branded. And so that's what tells me like, hey, these are the areas we need to be investing in. They're working really hard for us. And so I think those are the pieces that I look at when I'm wanting to hit that 95%, is really what are the things that are like still obviously the 90, like brand, I think in the day used to be, and probably Mata, when you didn't believe in it, was probably the days when it was like a billboard on, on the 101 or whatever, or a print advertisement. I used to work in consumer packaged goods. We did all the things, right? We did print, and we did like out of home, and we did all the things. I worked on Chips Ahoy and Nutter Butter. And so now we're working on B2B stuff. It just doesn't work like that, right? And not nearly as much. And so what is the new modern sort of brand version of that? Maybe there's a billboard in there in a very strategic place. But in general, it's CTV, it's paid advertising, it's influencer and thought leadership on LinkedIn. It is, it's keynotes at events, like having the talking spot. So if I'm going to sponsor an event, the only reason you're going to see my booth is because we got a speaking slot to go with it, right? And so I'm like, man, if we're not on stage talking and sort of and getting a chance to tell our story in front of a captive audience, I'm not sticking a booth for the trade show for people to walk by and get tchotchkes or whatever. So it's really so much about getting a chance to tell that story. So that's what I'm a big believer in that. And like I said, I think the press release component's a big part of that. Owned content, owned research. I just put our strategy together and everything was focused on what are our own elements that we can build. So here's another great example. So for 6sense, we have the CMO Coffee Talk. A lot of CMOs in that, right? There are thousands in it. There's 400 to 500 there every single week to talk. I was at Demandbase, direct competitor to 6sense for years. And at Demandbase, the one thing that would hit me, I could go toe to toe in a presentation with a customer and they might be like, yes, I love the product. I'm totally in. I'm bought for that. Like, I love the capabilities. It'd be a practitioner, right? Like a director of digital marketing. They're like, yes, this is what I need. And then they'd come back and they'd be like, we're going with 6sense. And I'd be like, why? And they'd be like, because my boss is in the Coffee Talk and she's loyal to the 6sense brand. And I'd be like, you're signing like a 6-figure deal on a big application to run your central marketing because your CMO is committed to the branded 6sense community Coffee Talk. Like, that's pretty incredible, right? That's a power of brand right there, that somebody's like, or they go to Empowered, right? And they've come every year. And so they're just loyal to 6sense because of that. That's amazing. That is, you can't replicate that. There's no moat out there of LLM or SEO or anything else that will replace pure brand loyalty. And so building that brand comes from a lot of those personal experience, like community. And again, those are things that it's hard to connect those to pipeline all the time.
You also mentioned you guys are doing a lot on paid social. I'm curious what's actually working. What are channels? I think everyone struggles with that, and I'm curious what have you seen work, and what are some things that you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, mostly I would say it's LinkedIn. We're testing some other things. We're exploring some YouTube stuff. If we call that paid social, I don't know if people do. I do, but maybe people don't. But certainly LinkedIn has been the biggest thing that's paid off, and I think it's because we run paid social through 6sense, right? Through an account based lens, and so we have, our target market. We have our target account list, which is, I think it's around 8,000 accounts. And then we have our ICP, which is sort of like, the target account list is a subset of our ICP. And then our ICP is a subset of the overall TAM that we can actually serve. We only spend paid social at that target account list and maybe the ICP, but we don't go any broader than that. And so we don't spend a ton of money, but we have a crazy high ROI because it's been a hand-picked list of people and accounts that we know fit the profile of who our ICP is. We've also used 6sense data and seen that they are fishing around in our area a little bit. And so we've had a really high conversion because it's like fish in a barrel, right? We are targeting accounts who seem to be interested in us and have shown some intense signals, even very light ones. And I think that's why we used to, when I got here, we kind of sold a little bit to kind of everyone. And so it was a little bit more of a scatter shot instead of a laser focus. And as soon as we laser focused paid social, which used to just seem expensive with low ROI, became still expensive, but a much higher ROI because we're getting so much higher conversion on every single touch.
So Kelly, this has been really interesting. We usually end with a few kind of faster questions to get the audience to know you better. Curious, what books are you reading right now?
I am reading a couple. I'm reading Theo of Golden. If y'all haven't read it, it's phenomenal. I want to be Theo when I grow up. He's about this 87-year-old man and amazing, but very, very good. So I encourage that. I just finished The Correspondent. Both these are fiction. Correspondent, the entire book is letters, and it's just fascinating to see the way the story unfolds. And then nonfiction, I am reading. I talk a lot about it, and I found this book that actually matched it. I talk a lot about to my team and my family is about being present, being where your feet are, especially I don't think work-life balance is real, but I love, I always tell my team, just be where your feet are. If you're in this meeting, be in this meeting. And if you're with your family, be with your family, be 100% wherever your feet are. And I found this book called Be Where Your Feet Are that this coach from 76ers wrote. I had actually heard it from the Yale football philosophy, and I thought it was very, very cool and sort of adopted it as my own. And so anyway, so I'm reading Be Where Your Feet Are as well. And it's a great book to talk just about the value of being present wherever you are.
What are your favorite tools right now? What's one tool at work that it's making your life easier, and maybe it's an unexpected one?
Yeah, I mean, I would say certainly from an application perspective, Dream Data is my new favorite because we finally got our whole model built and tagged right, and campaigns are tagged right and everything, so I can actually see what's working. That's what we use for multi-touch. And so that's a big one. The other part of that is I can actually see not only multi-touch attribution in its entirety, but I can also see which channels are working at different stages of the pipeline. So for instance, gifting. I look at gifting and they'll say, oh, gifting is making this massive improvement on pipeline. And then when I look at it, I'm like, but we're using all gifting for a door opener to get meetings. I'll take any meeting for a free gift. So that's not high quality to me. But if we can use gifting late stage to do deal acceleration, that's a much more valuable use for me. I'd rather, if we have somebody in kind of that stage 4 and they're right on the cusp and they're from Canada, I want to send them something for the Canadian soccer turn, as Canada keeps winning in the World Cup or whatever it is. I want to get really, really targeted. So I have a lot of fun going into Dream Data and poking around. I feel like it's my one source of truth versus kind of anecdotal. That's one. And then we just got we've had Copilot for a while. I was like, yeah. We don't use ChatGPT at work. I can only use it personal. So we just got Claude Enterprise licenses, and I'm sort of obsessed. And so I talk to Claude a lot about just helping me think through situations, helping me sometimes it's just listening to a meeting where I brainstorm for an hour about our strategy, and then Claude magically turns it into a deck. And I'm like, oh, thank you for taking that whole meeting that you just listened to and transcribed and converting it into my 10-page strategy. So I'm a big fan of Claude just in seeing what it's capable of. Those are sort of my two right now.
And what do you think is one skill that becomes more valuable as everything else? As one human skill that becomes more valuable as AI takes over more and more of our work?
Oh, I mean, I think I would say this strategic strategy and clarity. I think AI forces you to really pick the words right, to pick the message right, to pick the position right. I think because if not, it's just what the problem is with AI to begin with, right? Is that you can activate AI all over your platform, but if it's being fed slightly wrong information, it's going to execute fast and efficiently, but confidently wrong, right? And so so it forces you to, before it goes into the AI machine, that you really nail what you're saying. You can't generalize anymore. On the other side, I think what AI allows you to do is, I did a recording a couple weeks ago with John Miller, and he was talking about the era, the shift from rules to reasoning, which I think is really, really interesting. And he talked about rules being that in the old world, think about Marketo or Eloqua or anything like that. It was rules based. If they click on this, they get 3 points. If they click on this, they get 5. Same way we do engagement score at 6sense. If they do these 5 things, that will qualify them to be a high quality account, a 6QA. And those things, that's all rules. If the data is bad, that falls apart. AI has the ability to kind of fill in the gap. It can work on reasoning. It can reason a solution. And so I think it really makes sense that we have to nail what we want it to reason on. And that doesn't mean the data has to be perfect. It means that our strategy has to be tight. And so I think it forces us to just think more before we execute. But then the execution can go 100 times faster, which is great.
Awesome. Well, this is so interesting. And as Ethan said, we both learned a ton from this. So we're so grateful to have you with us today. So thank you for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I love the conversation.
Thanks for listening. If you found this conversation valuable, help more people find the show.
Hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, rate, review, or share with a colleague who may be navigating the same challenges.
Want to dive deeper? Head to fom.xyz for show notes, resources, and more. See you next time.